This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2008 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2008. We also ask the question, is it actually cool to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Plus, our Spotlight Museum this week is the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, New York. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. The year was 2008. In music, Spotify started, first in Sweden before, of course, eventually going worldwide. will.i.am created a viral song and celebrity music video using the words of then-presidential candidate Barack Obama's speeches, entitled Yes We Can. A lot of musicians and other entertainers also got behind Obama, helping to propel him to the presidency later in the year over Republican Senator John McCain. Michael Jackson released a 25th anniversary edition of his album Thriller, which turned out to be the last album that was released while he was still alive. There would be a bunch of releases after he passed away in 2009. Scott Weiland left Velvet Revolver. Tina Turner started her 50th anniversary tour. Madonna had the biggest money-making tour for a female solo artist with $280 million made. Taylor Swift and Beyoncé have both broken that record since. A fire on the backlot of Universal Studios Hollywood burned down a warehouse that held master copies for artists as far back as Louis Armstrong. The original master copies for some artists like Eminem were actually in the process of being transferred to digital copies when the fire occurred. However, a decent amount of the 175,000 master copies supposedly had made it through the process at the time, sending the other melted master copies to the realm of history, never to be recovered. DJ AM and Travis Barker of Blink-182 were involved in a horrific private plane accident that killed 4 other people, including the pilot, when their private plane skidded off the runway. And DJ AM would commit suicide a couple of years later, reportedly due to not being able to deal with the pain from the injuries suffered in the accident. Bands that formed in 2008 included Chickenfoot, Clean Bandit, Fun, The Saturdays, the Swedish House Mafia, and Selena Gomez and the Scene. Groups that broke up before, of course, their inevitable reunions or announced their hiatus included Hootie and the Blowfish, John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers, Bauhaus, the Cheetah Girls, King Crimson, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Digital Underground, Ministry, Social Distortion, My Chemical Romance, Big and Rich, Incubus, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Westlife, The Police, Toto, Velvet Revolver, and the Spice Girls. Groups that actually got back together in 2008 included Ben Folds 5, Letters to Cleo, New Kids on the Block, Bad Company, Biohazard, Republica, Split Enz, Dishwalla, Dirty Vegas, Eraserheads, Jane's Addiction, The Fat Boys, Triumph, Space Hog, the Stone Temple Pilots, Stetsasonic, Yes, Ultravox, and Yazoo, better known in America as Yaz. The best-selling album that year was Lil Wayne's The Carter 3. Other artists having big years included Adele, Coldplay, Rick Ross, Alicia Keys, Madonna, Usher, Disturbed, Miley Cyrus, Amy Winehouse, Rihanna, Leona Lewis, Kings of Leon, Josh Groban, Taylor Swift, Janet Jackson, and the soundtracks to Twilight, Mamma Mia, and High School Musical 3. The biggest single of the year was Flo Rida and T-Pain's Low. 2008 was also the year that singer Akon did a cameo on a song to help out another singer who was just starting out at the time, Lady Gaga, with that song being her debut single, Just Dance. Other big singles were done by Coldplay, Leona Lewis, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Madonna with Justin Timberlake, Jason Mraz, Pink, T.I., Jack Johnson, Duffy, and the Kings of Leon. In country music, one of the biggest scandals of the year was country music singer Mindy McCready confirming earlier reports that she had had an affair with baseball player Roger Clemens that actually started when she was 15 years old. The other scandal was the affair by Shania Twain's husband, super producer Mutt Lange, with her best friend. Singer Anne Murray also retired from performing. No scandal involved, though, thankfully. As far as country albums went for the year, Taylor Swift, Tim McGraw, and Toby Keith each had 2 albums that hit number 1 on the country charts that year, as did albums by Kelly Pickler, Jessica Simpson, Alan Jackson, Julianne Hough, Lady A, known at the time as Lady Antebellum, Darius Rucker, Sugarland, Kenny Chesney, Chris Cagle, Brad Paisley, Jewel, George Strait, and a now that's what I call country compilation album. Big country music singles included Carrie Underwood's All-American Girl, Sugarland's All I Want to Do, Montgomery Gentry's Back When I Knew It All, and also their song Roll With Me, Kenny Chesney's Better as a Memory, and also the song Everybody Wants to Go to Heaven, the Zac Brown Band's Chicken Fried, Rodney Atkins' Cleaning This Gun, Darius Rucker's Don't Think I Don't Think About It, Alan Jackson's Good Time, and Taylor Swift's Love Story. In hip-hop, L.A. Reid became head of Def Jam Records, Twista started his own record label, hip-hop label TVT shut down but then was brought back out of bankruptcy by the Orchard record label, Jay-Z signed his $150 million 360 deal with Live Nation, meaning that Live Nation got a cut of his touring merchandise and record sales, and Nate Dogg suffered 2 strokes. Big hip-hop albums that came out in 2008 included Lil Wayne's The Carter 3, T.I.'s Paper Trail, Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak, Young Jeezy's The Recession, The Game's LAX, Please's Definition of Real, Ludacris's Theater of the Mind, Rick Ross's Trilla, Nas's Untitled, and Snoop Dogg's Ego Trippin'. Big hip-hop singles of the year included T.I.'s Whatever You Like, T.I. and Rihanna's Live Your Life, Lil Wayne's Lollipop, Got Money, and A Milli. Flo Rida and T-Pain's Low, Flo Rida's in the Air, Snoop Dogg's Sensual Seduction, Jay-Z and T.I.'s Swagger Like Us, and Kanye's Love Lockdown. In dance music, Sonny Moore started using the Skrillex name when he started DJing in clubs that year. Ultra Miami Music Festival hit 10 years old. Dance songs that were big included The Prodigy's Invaders Must Die, Eric Pridz's Pajano, Chris Lake's remix of Sia's Buttons, Prida's Rack Funk, and also Miami to Atlanta. Crooker's remix of Kid Cudi's Day and Night, DJ Fresh's Gold Dust, David Guetta's Love Don't Let Me Go, Bitch's Amelie, Deadmau5's Reward is More Cheese, Not Exactly, Alone With You, and High Friend. Deadmau5 had a really big year in 2008. Zoo Brazil's Kids, Chasing Statuses, and Plan B's song Pieces, Thin White Duke's remix of Madonna's Miles Away, Funkerman's Speed Up, Ferry Corsten's Are You Ready, Nadia Ali's Rapture, which was originally done by her first project, I.O., Hardwell's Smoke, Afrojack's Bungee, Justice's DVNO, and the Chemical Brothers' Hey Boy, Hey Girl. Dave Matthews band member Leroy Moore passed away from complications from an ATV accident. Other famous artists who passed away in 2008 included Margaret Truman, not the former First Lady, Freddie Hubbard, Eartha Kitt, Odetta, Mitch Mitchell, Edie Adams, Jeff Healey, Richard Wright, Isaac Hayes, producer Jerry Wexler, Ronnie Drew, Johnny Griffin, Joe Stafford, Bo Diddley, Eddie Arnold, Robert Rauschenberg, Layla Genzer, Jessica Jacobs, Klaus Dinger, Norman Smith, Ivan Rebroff, Jaeger Letoff, DJ K. Swift, hip-hop producer Johnny J, MC Breed, and Henri Salvador. In awards for the music of 2008, at the Grammy Awards, Robert Plant and Alison Krauss were the big winners of the night with 5 awards. They won Album of the Year for the album Raising Sand. Record of the Year also went to them for the song Please Read the Letter. Song of the Year actually went to Coldplay for Viva La Vida, and Adele won Best New Artist that year. At the American Music Awards, Chris Brown won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, Taylor Swift won Artist of the Year. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Video of the Year went to Britney Spears for Piece of Me. The Soul Train Music Awards actually weren't held in 2008 because of a writer's strike. Carrie Underwood, Chris Brown, Katy Perry, Alicia Keys, Kid Rock, and Flo Rida with T-Pain won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held that year in Serbia, Russia won for the song Believe. Kenny Chesney won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Carrie Underwood won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. Duffy won Best British Album for Rock Ferry, and Girls Aloud won Best Song for The Promise at the Brit Awards. Nickelback won Best Album for Dark Horse, while Cardinal Offshall won Best Song for Dangerous, and Sam Roberts won out Artist of the Year at the Juno Awards. Apocalypto also won Album of the Year for The Presets, and Gabriella Cilmi won Single of the Year for Sweet About Me at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, In the Heights won Best Musical from Lin-Manuel Miranda, and South Pacific won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music was won that year by David Lang for The Little Match Girl Passion. 2008 was also the year that Bob Dylan received a Special Music Citation Pulitzer Prize. Musically at the Academy Awards, A.R. Rahman won Best Song for Jai Ho from the movie Slumdog Millionaire, and he also won Best Original Score for the same movie, as Slumdog Millionaire racked up a number of awards that ceremony, including Best Picture. Elbow won the Mercury Music Prize for 2008 for the album The Seldom Seen Kid. The 2008 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held on March 8th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, harmonica player Little Walter was inducted into the Sidemen category. Songwriting and producing team Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff were inducted into the non-performers category. And in the performers category, the hall inducted Leonard Cohen, Madonna, the Ventures, the Dave Clark Five, and this next artist. Before he was one of the founders of Farm Aid, before he was an inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, before he was also a staple on classic radio stations everywhere, he was just a guy with a made-up stage name who was trying not to get booted off his own record label. John Mellencamp was born on October 7, 1951, and was a relatively struggling rock and roller named Johnny Cougar back in the late 1970s. His first album yielded the minor hit I Need a Lover. His record company hated his next album so much that not only did they not release the album, but they dropped him from the label. They, of course, ended up releasing the album once he became popular in order to cash in because, well, that's what you do, I suppose. Anywho, under his new record label and under his new stage name, John Cougar, John released a couple of albums that had a couple of top 40 hits like This Time and Ain't Even Done with the Night. The record label was pleased because, as John put it, the label thought that he was another Neil Diamond, even though he never really was. John started working on his next album called American Fool, which, according to him, was 3 good songs and the rest of it was filler. The record company reps came to the studio to hear his new songs, including the good ones, and hated all of them. Their thought pattern went from getting a new producer to just simply dropping Mellencamp from the label itself yet again. Finally, though, cooler heads prevailed, and he was allowed to finish the album. One of his good songs, as he called it, was a mid-tempo rocker. The idea came to him when he thought about something a friend of his said about a visit to a chiropractor. She said it hurt so good. Mellencamp used the line, traded off lyrics with his writing partner, and worked out the chords within one day. When the song was released, it became a huge hit. The song, Hurt So Good, spent 16 weeks in the top 10 and got as high as number 2. It probably would have actually have hit number 1 if it wasn't for Survivor's mega smash song at the time from the Rocky III soundtrack, Eye of the Tiger. That had been number 1 for a number of weeks and got in John's way. Hurt So Good also got John a Grammy Award the very next year, and the album that it came from, American Fool, hit number 1. John Mellencamp has been nominated for 13 Grammy Awards, winning 1 in 1983 for Best Male Rock Performance for Hurt So Good, along with numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards from different national songwriting and recording organizations. He has released 24 studio albums, 2 live albums, and 4 compilation albums. Of those, 19 hit the top 40, with 10 of those going top 10, including 1982's American Fool, which hit number 1. He also has released 75 singles, and of those, 52 hit the top 40, with 24 of those getting to the top 10, and 10 of them hitting number 1. John Mellencamp, as he is now known, had great albums like American Fool, regardless of what he thinks about 3 good songs and the rest of it filler, along with great albums like Scarecrow, Lonesome Jubilee, Big Daddy, Whenever We Wanted, Human Wheels, and Dance Naked, along with classic songs like Pink Houses, Jack and Diane, The Authority Song, Cherry Bomb, Hand to Hold On To, Crumbling Down, Lonely Old Night, Check It Out, Paper and Fire, Get a Leg Up, Small Town, ROCK in the USA, cover versions of Under the Boardwalk and Wild Night, Hurt So Good, and a ton more, which led to his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not bad for a guy who was this close to being thrown off of his record label, and actually got thrown off of his record label the first go-around. Presented for induction by 1999 Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Billy Joel, John Mellencamp, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2008. And if you're not familiar with his music, we have put his music onto this week's podcast YouTube music playlist. The link for it is, as always, in the show notes. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you about our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over the events, music releases, births, and passings for that day in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops each and every day, including on the weekends, on this channel, the Music History Today Network, and also on our Music History Today Network YouTube page. Now, back to the Music Halls of Fame podcast. We are getting close to the time when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony is coming, along with the nominations announcement. With all of that, of course, has come the usual griping on social media and podcasts like this one, where we discuss who should and should not be into the Hall of Fame this year, or next year, or any other year for that matter. Surprisingly, it's not just the fans talking about how this band got snubbed or why that artist got in. It's sometimes the artists themselves. For instance, Radiohead were inducted, but chief architect of the band, Tom York, said in the past that he didn't think that being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was cool. The same went for Robert Smith, whose band The Cure were also inducted in the same year that Radiohead were. Tom York, by the way, did not show up for the induction ceremony, although two of his bandmates did. I've also made mention in the past of the fact that Iron Maiden should be inducted, but who doesn't want them to be inducted? Actually, that would be Iron Maiden lead singer Bruce Dickinson. In fact, he absolutely hates the hall and what he thinks it stands for. The Rock Hall, I guess, is different from any other Hall of Fame. I mean, if you're an athlete, then making it into the respective Hall of Fame at the end of your career is almost as important as winning a championship, in some cases even more so. Athletes work their entire lives so that they can be called Hall of Famers. It's a source of pride. It's validation that they did a good job and got the respect of their peers. Basketball players, football players, baseball players, hockey players, they all want to get into their respective halls of fame. Some even break down into tears when they get the call or the visit from their hall committees telling them that they're going in. Just watch some of those Football Hall of Fame announcement videos online sometime and watch how huge grown men suddenly turn into crying, babbling little babies. It's really emotional. Rock music is different in that its roots are actually based on rebellion. To some musicians, being in the hall is a sign of conforming and or being corporate. I also have to figure that part of some of the artists talking about hating the hall has more to do with trying to look cool to their fan base. It's sort of a, yeah, we'd like to be in the hall, but that would actually kind of make us look uncool. So if we get in, it'll be with us kicking and screaming. We may not even show up just so we can look even cooler and give a big middle finger to the hall. There are some legit gripes about the hall itself, however. While, for instance, Steve Miller's behavior during his induction was, let's be nice about it, less than professional, he was right to talk about how people being honored have to pay a lot of money up front for a table. Same with Neil Young, who did not show up for his induction because of the same reason. Some reports say that the price tag for a table is $10,000. If that's true, then that's just wrong and definitely smacks of corporate greed and behavior. If the hall is going to charge crazy money for a table to someone whom they are actually honoring, then the hall should go to a corporation to have the table sponsored, like, say, I don't know, the record companies, who are all going to benefit from the renewed interest in whatever the artist is at that point, and actually make their money back for that $10,000 just from all the renewed interest and selling of the albums and singles. Of course, there are some artists who spoke poorly about the hall and how they couldn't care less about getting in until the actual night when they were inducted, that is. Geddy Lee hated the idea, for instance, of having Rush inducted right up until he was on stage and saw just how much his fans loved the fact that the band was finally getting in. The guys from Kiss felt the same way until the Kiss Army showed up at their ceremony. Same, by the way, for Robert Smith and the members of Radiohead who showed up. Only then did some of the band members realize the impact of their music and getting into the hall actually had on their fans. And maybe that's the thing. See, to me, getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame not only validates the fact that your work will forever be remembered, it also shows respect in a strange way to your fan base, especially the ones who were there from the very beginning. In Iron Maiden's case, getting into the hall would show that heavy metal, especially their hardcore version of heavy metal, would be given the respect that it so richly deserves. In the end, that's what this is all about, isn't it? Respect. That's why being in the hall is important, because there are a lot of genres that will never get the respect of the hall voters, like, say, EDM. Even with hip-hop acts going in regularly now, there are still a lot of voters who think that hip-hop doesn't even belong in the hall. So I highly doubt that EDM will ever get in, aside from the pioneers of electronic music, Kraftwerk, for whom it took forever to even be considered for induction, let alone to finally be inducted. See, to me, being inducted into the hall would be a huge honor. It doesn't so much validate you as an artist, because you could have easily have just made music in your parents' garage. Let it be your side gig maybe, and never release it to anybody. What it does, though, is that it shows respect to your fan base. It shows all of those square pegs in round holes, all who dressed up in black, even in the middle of summer, or who stayed home, put on your music with a decent set of headphones, and dissected your music like we were doing surgery, that we all matter. If some artists can't show up for themselves, then at least show up for fans like you and I, who stood by these artists for all these years when being their fans and not being in the hall was really actually considered uncool. Because to us, for these artists that we love to finally be shown respect and to get into the Hall of Fame is actually kind of cool. Our Spotlight Museum this week is focused on the quintessential American music form known as jazz. The National Jazz Museum in Harlem, New York, was first thought up in 1995 and was the brainchild of attorney Leonard Garment, who was general counsel to U.S. Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, and himself a rather good jazz saxophonist. It opened in 1997 at 104 East 126th Street and stayed there until 2016, when it moved to its current location at 58 West 129th Street, just off of Malcolm X Boulevard. You take the 2 or the 3 train to 125th Street and walk up a few short blocks and then turn right onto 129th Street. The museum's artistic directors are John Baptiste and Christian McBride, and it has many exhibits and memorabilia. However, its best-known collection is from audio engineer William Savory, who recorded radio broadcasts of many jazz greats using aluminum records in order to preserve his recordings longer. The museum has over 1,000 of these recordings and is in the process of digitally cleaning them up. They've released a few of them on iTunes as the Savory Collection if you want to purchase them. The museum is a Smithsonian affiliate museum. Suggested museum admission is $10. Their hours are from Thursday to Saturday, noon until 5 p.m., and you have to have a photo ID in order to get in. However, if you can't make it to Harlem, they do have an extensive online collection. Go to jmih.org for more information, and as always, we'll throw that link into the show notes for you. One person who was recorded by William Savory was this next performer. This man was the 9th out of 12 kids. His father came from Poland and his mother came from Lithuania. They met in Baltimore and moved to Chicago, where our band leader was born, and their neighborhood was in the ghetto in the Maxwell Street neighborhood. Although the family didn't have any money, the father somehow managed to pay for his kids' music lessons as the kid became interested in music. And while he was in Chicago, this kid, Benny Goodman, learned from artists such as Johnny Dodds and Jimmy Noon. By the time he was 14, Benny was already playing professionally. His father, unfortunately, wouldn't live to see his success. His father tragically passed away in an accident when he was 17 years old. After that, Benny moved to New York City and became a successful session musician. After a number of years, he got a band of his own together and started working the supper clubs and got on a radio show on NBC called Let's Dance. And there, the band started playing a new style of music called swing music. The radio show was popular enough, but it became a victim of a strike and was canceled right in the middle of the Great Depression. And that is where history kind of takes a weird turn. The radio show lineup was such that Benny's band was on late in the evening, sometimes after midnight East Coast time. And on the East Coast, that meant that most people hadn't heard his new style of music or actually of the Benny Goodman Band itself. However, on the West Coast, the radio show was live, not taped, which meant that people were listening around 9 o'clock in the evening to the show. And it was there that the Benny Goodman Band and the swing style of music took hold. The band heard that kids on the West Coast had invented dances to go to the music, sort of the TikTok challenge of its day, I guess. So the band scraped some money together and went to tour the West Coast. And little by little, the music and the dancing went from the West Coast to the East Coast and began to catch on. And the rest, as they say, is history. The music and the dancing became a cultural phenomenon known as swing music, and the Pied Piper, clarinetist and band leader Benny Goodman, became the catalyst. But in 1938, he took it to a whole other level. See, in a lot of big cities in the world, there were certain concert venues that are considered highbrow, for lack of a better phrase. Maybe stuck up is actually a better way of putting it. These are places where your normal garage band would not ever be caught dead in, namely because they couldn't get in. Hell, you almost feel like you have to get dressed up in a Brooks Brothers suit just to walk by these places. These places usually have ballet companies and classical music playing in them. New York City actually has more than a few of them. Lincoln Center with the Metropolitan Opera House, and Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall once was the main concert place for the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. It's a pretty prestigious place still for a musician to play. That old joke about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 still rings true. It's a nice little feather in the cap and a bucket list item for musicians everywhere. It has since, thankfully, opened its doors to other types of music other than classical. And this next event helped an awful lot with this. Back in the early part of the 20th century, jazz was not taken seriously in mainstream America. Looked at as black people's music, along with rock and roll in the mid-20th century, and therefore not considered worthy of listening to, it developed a following, but was not looked at in the same vein as classical music or American standards. And it actually took swing music and Benny Goodman to help to begin to change people's opinions about it. In 1938, by then, Benny Goodman and swing music were at the height of their power. Goodman was selling out concert halls all over America. He was also a film and radio star. One day, his publicist came to him with an idea. How about the band play Carnegie Hall? At first, he laughed at the idea. To him, that was kind of like, I don't know, in these days, Justin Bieber playing at the Metropolitan Opera House. Kind of a weird thing. Then, he started talking himself into doing it. He had not only his band on this one, but he also brought in members of the Count Basie and Duke Ellington orchestras. Top ticket prices were $2.75, which, when you consider inflation these days, would be a $59.62 ticket, which still not bad, especially when for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, cheap tickets start at $150 and kind of work their way up from there. It's not a bad ticket price, mind you, but when you consider the times of uncertainty, especially with the Great Depression still around and the steady drumbeats of World War II coming ever closer and closer to American shores by then, Benny and Company weren't exactly playing for the poor folk of the time. The concert itself, though, was a smash. Although no one thought it was actually recorded, it was. And you can get the concert on CD, actually. What's now ironic about all of this, though, is that jazz, which was once considered the bastard stepchild of quote-unquote real music, is now itself considered highbrow in a lot of circles, including my old university, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where in our music education program, when I was in there in the 1980s, it was drilled into me on the regular that the only real music was jazz and classical. Be that as it may, Benny Goodman broke down the barrier when he held a night of jazz music at Carnegie Hall on January 16th, 1938. It's the recording of this concert that made it into the Library of Congress National Recording Registry, and there's even more recordings of Benny's performances in the Savory Collection at the Jazz Museum of Harlem in New York City. And we will also put some of Benny Goodman's music onto the YouTube music playlist for this podcast. The link, as always, is in the show notes. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.